Oh, Gabrielle, you okay? Yeah, I think it was just a cramp. Oh. Do I get you to a healer?
Come on, bring her in quickly.
Them Bones was almost a return to the double episode, to the sin trades. We were back with the Amazons. It also had pretty high production values. I think they gave us 9 days to shoot it, and they threw quite a bit of money into extra equipment because it was a pretty complex episode, but it was fun to shoot.
Bears the mark of the shamaness. You know who it is, don't you?
We made a conscious effort to make sure that Alti was a very different villain from Callisto. So, once we had her in the previous episodes and she was, dead and gone, we thought, okay, Claire did such a terrific job. We have to try to figure out a way to bring her back. And in normal Renaissance fashion, we, figured out the most harebrained, crazy idea to do that.
Wait a minute. I'm still a little confused on this whole spiritual realm thing.
Nature is composed of several planes of reality, Maurice, and they're all united by one thing, the mind.
Even though she had to be in the dreamscape in this, we still felt that it was incredibly powerful and sort of weird if we would create an episode that I think John Fawcett did such a great job at, which was creating a sort of a drug trip kind of environment that Xena and Gabrielle have to go back and forward in order to actually beat this person and achieve this goal. So once we saw Claire and once we saw how menacing and cool she was, we realized that we needed to bring her back. So that's how this episode came about.
Xena's little bitch. Welcome to the doghouse.
The skeleton baby coming out of Xena's stomach. Yeah, my wife still actually looks at that with revulsion, having 2 kids. We knew that it was going to be a risky venture, but we also wanted to shock the audience and go, oh, this is going to be one of those episodes, isn't it?
Did you give her something? Get it off me! I've never seen anything like this.
And we achieved it by a combination of prosthetics on set, and then also doing a digital skeleton baby that was done afterwards. I think Flat Earth did that, coming out of the stomach. So it was a combination of both practical live action effects and then digital effects after the fact.
When Gabrielle crosses over to the other side, it was a reprise to the kind of the tripping, going into a trance sort of thing that we'd done in Sin Trade 1 and 2, but we wanted to approach it in a slightly different manner this time. Rick had a few ideas, and I remember shooting a day of tests of different things that we wanted to try out. And amongst those tests, what we did was shoot on reversal film rather than negative, but put it through the same processing. It's a technique that stills photographers use called cross-processing, and it's used a lot on music videos and so on. So we shot some of that on 16mm, and I went in and did some transfers and graded it with some interesting colour shifts and wacky colours. And that ended up being one of the techniques that we ended up using. And we also experimented with a very high contrast black and white film, and some of that material is in there. Very grainy, very high contrast. But I think my favourite thing in that episode, my favourite visual thing, was a body rig that we made, and we actually got a very lightweight wind-up Bolex camera, 16mm camera, just a spring drive to wind it up, with a very wide lens, and put that on a body rig about this far away from Gabrielle, and then ran it at slow speeds and got her to race around madly, and it's a pretty interesting effect. But I have to admit, it's an effect that I stole from Martin Scorsese in Mean Streets way back in the 70s, where I remember as a young man going and seeing Mean Streets and seeing this great scene of Robert De Niro in slow motion walking into a bar and being drunk and falling over sideways, and the camera was like completely locked to his body, and as he fell sideways, the camera went exactly in time with him, and I always wondered how on earth they did that, and figured it out a few years later and decided it was time to try it for myself. Perfect opportunity.
We actually had Lucy laying on a situation where she dipped down, and then we built the rest of her body up on a rig and that rig included the stomach section, which allowed us to then, have puppeteers below, sort of making those weird alien-like movements on her skin before it actually burst through. Yuck. Lucy was pregnant at the time that we were shooting this, and were we ever concerned, or was there ever talk that having a pregnant lady on set and some of the graphic imagery that we were showing? Yeah, it wasn't probably only Lucy, but we were concerned about all mothers, I think, that would see this and watch this. By this point, we were pretty okay to actually shock people with it. Lucy has always been incredibly an incredible goer, as they say in New Zealand, someone that's willing to go for it. And I don't think that she ever expressed any concern about it, knowing that it's a fantasy show. But it certainly does give one pause if they've ever had children or are thinking about having children to make sure that you don't have demon spawn, I guess.
Yeah, when Gabrielle wakes up on the other side, just before she faces off with Alti, she kind of looks around and everything's frozen in place. So I think the one that works the best is the fire, and we had a few experiments. I think what we ended up doing was shooting the elements separately against blue screen, but with the fire we closed the shutter on the camera to get a very narrow shutter speed, so that rather than having blurring flames when you froze that frame, we actually got real sharp frames. So the motion goes in and it just stops dead, and the same thing happens with the birds and the trees and so on. When Xena crosses into Alti's world in the second half of the episode, we wanted to do something different with design than we'd done in the Sin Trades. It's always a challenge to keep it interesting for the audience and make it a little different. And I'm not sure where the idea came from, but we decided to balance purple light and green light, and the special effects department came up with an actual real burning green flame. If you look at the episode, you'd probably think it's done in post-production as a kind of a colour shift. But they actually had some chemicals that they put together and produced a green flame. And that was the basis of, I then added green lighting on top of the green flames and countered that with purple, which is a complementary colour, which worked pretty well with that. And it gave it a whole supernatural, surreal sort of feel. Something different from normal Xena forest world.
The skeleton fight between Alti and Xena was a rather ambitious undertaking for the show, in that we were going to completely create a CGI battle, which had never been done before. We had had sequences with CGI creatures before, but they were generally interacting with the humans. And so you had a point of reference in the sense that the human would play his part of the scene, and then the animator could go back in and, using the actors' movements, they could kind of mirror them with the CGI creature that they would then fight with. In the Alti-Xena fight in Dem Bones, a different set of characteristics had to be solved, or a different set of problems had to be solved, in that, as I mentioned, the characters would have to be completely created. But they had to have a reference, so we did give them a reference. And we had stunt doubles who had these black suits on with ping pong balls taped all over them. And we filmed them with the fight sequence in these outfits. And that was shot with a motion control camera, which every move the camera did followed the actors, and then that movement of the camera was memorized. The actors would then leave the set, and they'd shoot the set with nobody on it again. And that camera movement that would already been recorded would then record all of those movements of that background, or against that background plate. So that became what is known as a clear background plate. So then the foreground plate with the actors with the ping pong balls became the action reference. The background plate became the background in which the CGI skeletons would be placed. There were other things that were shot as well using the motion control, but those are essentially the two most important things. The reason I'm using this in an editorial discussion is that the sequence is edited, and then that determines how the special effects will go together. It's not a question of receiving a special effects shot and then going, oh, I have to fit this now into the editing scheme. It always worked the other way around, even though special effects shots were often planned in advance.
The final fight scene at the end between the skeletons of Alti and Xena, I think, is one of the CGI visual effects department's finest moments, actually, in that season. I was looking at the credits, and they had a huge number of 3D animators thrown at it, so it would have been their biggest job, probably in the entire Xena series, I'd say. But I think they did a fabulous job on it. I think what really tied the skeleton fighting into the background plates was the interactive lighting. We'd have lightning happening on the plates, and it would cross over onto the skeletons and so on. And they, so rather than looking like stuck-out characters, they were part of the scene. And sometimes CGI effects in the shows didn't have much time to do them, and they weren't the most fabulous. But in this instance, they really stepped up to the plate and did a great job.
Alti's line, "I've always wanted to be inside of you, Xena." Yes, it's definitely there, and you can take it however you like. I think it's one of those wonderfully nebulous Xena lines that will go down in history as you can read it however you like.
Always wanted to be inside of you, Xena.
When Alex and Bob came onto the show, I think they realized that the strength of the show was the relationship between the two characters, and knowing that they had to nurture that and never let that be relegated to second fiddle to, say, action or effects. So they never wanted to take the show away from its core, which was the relationship between Xena and Gabrielle. So, I mean, what they basically did is they wanted to take it more darker and more sinister, but still explore how, put under extreme duress, these two characters are going to react. And I think we did a really good job in sort of taking it to about as extreme as it can go. I think Gabrielle had died 2 or 3 times by this point anyway, so, you know, taking them into a real dark world was not anything that was adverse to us at the time.
A word of warning. The tree is guarded by an Amazon mystic named Chia. She has the power to see the truth in your heart. You may lie to yourself. You can't lie to Chia.
I'm ready. And what are we waiting for?